Hey y'all, welcome to Anita Goodesign. I'm Stephen Wilson.
And I'm Lauren Ravzak.
And we're going to teach you how to quilt in your embroidery machine. At Anita Goodesign, we've been creating embroidery collections for almost 20 years. Quilting collections for probably at least 10 years. And over time, I developed a couple really easy techniques that look really hard. That's the fun part for me, is when people look at something I did and go, that looks really hard, when it was actually really easy. But a lot of embroiderers are confused and distressed about all these steps it takes to make a quilt. And it's actually 3 steps. So everything we show you today, you're going to be able to make on your embroidery machine in a few easy steps. And all of our products are on sale that are on the website today as well.
They are. So our quilting collections are going to be 30% off for a limited time. So make sure you do your shopping. Don't wait, because you know you'll forget. And then there's going to be some free shipping on some stabilizers as well, and some scissors so you can get your notions that go with it.
So welcome to Anita Goodesign. Welcome to our class. You're going to love quilting in your embroidery hoop. So how do you start quilting in the hoop? Well, this is like an interesting process. And this is a story I used to tell whenever I did an event. So I would get up there, and I'm going to tell you about how I started in embroidery. Now, this is like 30 years ago. So I walked into, at that point, it was a trade show. With a lot of you, it might have been your local shop, or you saw a demo online. But I saw like this embroidery machine stitching something. And I'd never seen one like in person before. So I walked up to it, and I was immediately like mesmerized, just like y'all are. Nobody just like plans on doing this years in advance. We usually all have that same experience, is we walk in to a store or somewhere, we see it running at the mall, and we're like, I want to do that.
Yes.
And that's how we kind of all start. So, I learned how to do embroidery back then when there's no internet, no help, and basically trial and error. And, y'all don't realize how lucky you are now to be able to take a class like this, or any class online, to show you all these secrets. So I learned to embroider. Obviously, the first thing I did was like clothing and things like that. And I wasn't introduced to quilting until, much later in my embroidery career. So I was maybe 30. And I noticed a huge difference between an embroiderer and a quilter. Now, you might say, oh, we're the same. A lot of us do both. And I think they're totally different. I'm going to explain what I mean. So quilters are really organized, neat, and meticulous.
We try to be, right?
So if you're going to do something like this is like one of our quilts that you're going to learn all the secrets on how to make. And it combines all these different techniques like, red work and free motion with regular embroidery, applique, folded fabric borders, things like that. So when you're going to create a quilt, you have to start with an idea of what you're going to create. Then you have to pick your fabric. So that's like you go to the fabric store and you sort through the fabric, and I've seen people like smell the fabric. Like, is this something I want? Truly. And then you lay that all out, and then you take out your tools. And quilters have like more tools than a fisherman.
Yes.
It's like this ruler, that ruler, these things, all these little, accessories and different rotary cutters and scissors. And it's like a tackle box full of tools to do something. And then you start by like cutting your fabric and stacking it and doing all this stuff. And it's like, before we ever stitch one thing, we've already completed all these steps. So that's why I've always said quilters are very meticulous. And
yes, it is. Organized. It's a lot of cutting and measuring.
Okay. Embroiderers are the opposite. It's the complete opposite. When you get your embroidery machine and figure out how to get things running, you just walk around your house and find anything you can to stitch on. You're like, oh, here's a towel in the hamper. Yeah. I'm going to put like an initial on that. Oh, my husband left his baseball hat sitting around. I want to put something on that. And that's probably how your first 2 years of embroidery is done.
Oh, yes.
It's just randomly stitching on anything that anybody leaves laying around. And, of course, every Christmas gift for now till eternity is something embroidered.
Everybody gets an embroidered gift. Absolutely.
Right. So there are two different camps. I mean, like people that create an embroidered quilt approach it very organized. And a lot of embroiderers go, oh, that's too much work. Because embroidered quilts in the past were done completely differently than the way we do them now. So all those things that embroiderers generally don't like, which is measuring, being accurate.
Yes.
Like when I made my first quilt, I was like, oh, when they say like cut the fabric to 1 inch, they really mean like 1 inch.
1 inch.
It's not like sort of 1 inch.
No, it's baking. It's got to be precise.
Yes. So I was never precise. So I've said before I came up with this system, there's got to be an easier way. Like there's got to be an easier way where I can keep the fun part of what I like to do, which is choose colors, do the embroidery, and not the part I didn't like to do, which was measure and be accurate.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Ironically. And this is what I do for a living. So to me, that was never the fun part. And we're going to show you how to combine all those things to create these quilts, honestly, with very little measuring, very little. I mean, you still have to pick your fabric, but to me, that's
the fun part. Yes.
But you're not going to get hung up on all these little details because there's so many techniques in this. It's almost like a sampler. But every technique we're going to show you in today's class is based on certain fundamentals. So we do these same exact steps every single time, and then you just combine that with a few other techniques, and you could do all these different things. I mean, if we're going to look at this one again, this is Winter Wonderland, and it's available, right now. You can download it from the site.
30% off. It's on sale, too.
Even better. Well, we have techniques like free motion. So normally you would do this by like moving your fabric by hand under a sewing machine. Really hard to do. We have, again, this is a printed fabric with embroidery on it. So you combining that technique. You got a folded fabric border with stippling. Everybody loves stippling.
Oh, yes.
All our stippling is done with your embroidery machine. This one is multiple blocks in one square. And you notice how everything lines up perfectly. We're not measuring blocks like in a traditional quilting sense, and it's still soft.
Yes. Oh, the hand of the quilt is gorgeous.
Right.
Which is something that we love here at Anita Goodesign, is just how these feel when they're all complete.
Right. That's the idea. So this is really close to what a traditional embroidered quilt would be. It could be just free motion or red work. It could be just folded fabric borders. So we're going to show you dozens of examples. Again, all available today at 30% off with all these different techniques and how to do them, because it really comes down to one technique.
Yep, it's just the fundamentals.
Yes, so let's start with explaining the basic process. All right, so the first thing we do is start with your hoop and your size. So every one of our embroidered quilt collections comes in multiple sizes. Could be a block that's 5x5, 6x6, 7x7, 8x8, and some in even larger sizes. So what does that mean? Well, you have to choose the size before you start. A, B, C, D, whatever your machine is capable of stitching. So once we do that, it's easy. Then we start with our hoop. So everything obviously is made in your hoop. That's the whole idea of this class. So we use like a no-show mesh stabilizer, and all the other things we use to make these is also available on the site. Yes. So we hoop the stabilizer. It's very soft. We try to avoid like a crunchy, tear away stabilizer, because a lot of that stabilizer stays trapped, in the design, and you want that to have a soft hand. So we use a soft stabilizer. So we hoop that stabilizer nice and tight, and we'll stitch step one of the design. Okay. What is that? Really complicated. It's just a square. Okay. That's our placement stitch for our batting. Okay. So the next square, what are we doing here?
So this is our batting. And what we show you is, like Steve mentioned, that squaring stitch, that first step is where all of the design work will happen. And then we add our batting direct in the hoop. So you don't have to add the batting at the very end. You don't have to fumble with it when you have this huge quilt finished. We attach it directly in the hoop, and it tacks down in place. And then when you're all done with that, you trim down your batting, which guarantees you did not have any of that batting in your seam allowance at the very end when it's time to put your quilt blocks together.
That makes it easier to stitch together when you're going to assemble your quilt. And what the batting does, for some of you, this may be your first embroidered quilt, is when you see, the whole premise of quilting is like sandwiching two pieces of fabric with batting in the middle. And then when you add those, running stitches or stippling or geometrics, it puffs the top fabric to create that quilted texture. Mm-hmm. So that's why the batting is essential. We use like an organic, batting. It's not the high loft batting. It's just like a real thin style of batting. You could use whatever style you want.
Yep.
I would never say you have to buy something specific for this project, but we use generally like a medium to low loft batting. All right, so that's, after we trim that, we go on to our third step.
And this is where we attach our base fabric. So as Steve has mentioned, we're always adding our fabrics, picking your colors, and that's always quilter's choice there. And you just place your base fabric down, and again, it will tack that down in place for you. So this really gives you an idea of where all of your embroidery will go. If you're adding folded fabrics, if you're having applique, everything starts in this quadrant right
Exactly
here.
right, like that. So, but if you're doing a quilt, so say I want to make a quilt with nothing. Maybe it's just like a decorative fabric that you just want to make a quilt with. This could be done. Like at that point, like you're squared off, your batting is under there, and then you could turn that into a quilt as well. Now, we're showing you a square here, but sometimes those are in different shapes as well. So this is a good example of a quilt that we did. And you can see that this one is created, again, this is available on the site today, is we have a square here, then we have a rectangle here, there's a larger rectangle here. So it's all these different shapes that form a quilt. It's the exact technique we just showed. So that original shape could be in a rectangle, could be in a square, it could be in a honeycomb shape, whatever we design. And then